Yo, hello. I don't know if even anyone is around. This is very short notice, and if not, I'm just gonna, I'm just gonna talk to myself. Delta says, "Hey Don, hey, good to see you." So some people have made it, which is nice. Cred hasn't, which is not so nice. So you're kind of stuck with me again. Um, and given we have talked about the market on Wednesday, we can talk a little bit about the market, obviously. But I thought like we're just gonna do like a Q&A kind of thing, hang out, chat shit. It's a Friday, whatever. We don't have anything better to do, right? So might as well. Um, I was also too lazy to get a guest because it's too much back and forth. I've had guests the entire last 2 days, so wouldn't miss this for the world, Don the Don. Well, appreciate you coming by, man. So yeah, you're stuck with me, and you're stuck with Woo because they sponsor the show. um, Go check them out; they're cool. I like the people behind it. I like the way they run things, which means quite a bit in crypto, I think. Um, so yeah, if you think that is something worth checking out, go do so with the links in the description. If not, I think it's also completely fine. Generally speaking, obviously, with exchanges, right? And this is something I mean we've had plenty of. You always got to be a little bit careful, but with every single exchange, I technically even have to be careful with the decentralized exchanges because it's easy to kind of fuck things up there. So just generally be careful. But I have got nothing but good vibes from them. So yeah, and I've been trading there too. So were you born this disciplined or did you learn it? What influenced you the most in life? Dude, I'm the least disciplined person in real life. I don't give a fuck. I just do whatever I do, like whatever I want to do. And if I don't want to do it anymore, I don't have the discipline to keep going. So I don't know. It's just something that I do in trading that kind of works. Like I have no discipline anywhere besides in trading. So maybe it's just, maybe I've just been putting all my stat points into the trading discipline, taking them all out of the real life discipline, which so far has worked for me quite well. Just market shorted ETH. Let's fucking go. Um, Fair enough. Fair enough. It's gonna be an interesting weekly close. I like in general, like nothing's really changed since the last time we talked. The last time we talked, someone was calling for 50K. That was quite beautiful. Shout out to you if you're watching again. You're like 50K incoming at the peak or bottom of this week, and then it went up only from there. That was an excellent entry. But now obviously kind of went back there, whatever. Not looking too hot, not looking too bad. But it did finally close outside of this daily cluster, which makes it resistance now, right? Which I think is actually a good thing even for the bulls, because if this reclaims, you have a good bullish setup on your hands. And as is right now, you just, I mean, makes sense to be a little bit more cautious with the leverage anyway. With spot, whatever, with leverage on the long side, it seems a little bit dangerous. But then again, it's not the worst looking chart in the world. Hi Don, do you know why that the reason why Cred chose Hyman Minsky as profile pick? Bought that man's book because of it, because he likes him. I mean, Minsky is quite cool, no? Like everything I've read from him, I was kind of like, oh yeah, this makes a little bit of sense, which honestly doesn't apply to a lot of the books about like generally economy and like trading I read. The trading books are the worst. Economy I have no fucking idea about. I'm just a duck on the internet. But a lot of this stuff makes no sense to me, just from like a surface level look. But Minsky does make sense to me, and I'm guessing it's the same for Cred. Dawn in September 2020, December 2020, Bitcoin was grinding while altcoins bled, leading to true all-time high breakout. Hardly seeing any of that right now. I mean, that's not a question. um, Anyway, I mean, altcoins haven't been doing, like, to be honest, altcoins haven't been doing so well. Like, there's obviously, like, for example, Uni today, Uni did a massive jump. People are already fading it, but still, like, did a massive jump based on new fee structure, I think, that they proposed, which would be quite cool. But otherwise, like look, Solana is against Bitcoin's been getting shit on. AVAX against Bitcoin, same kind of deal. Link, it's okay, but also not doing so hot, and the other ones also not that good. Altcoins have not been outperforming as a whole. Like, there has been pockets of outperformance, but as a whole, and today is basically DeFi day, right? Like, uni pumps, everyone is gonna try to chase the pump. I think it's pretty much the worst that you can do, like, besides the initial push up, right? You see something like uni, and you're like, uni's up a shitload, let me just buy something else. And uni is DeFi, so I'm gonna buy Aave or like any of the other garbage, right? Curve, we talked about Curve yesterday, that got a little bit of a push. Not yesterday, the day before yesterday. But people are just buying these, even though they're like looking horrendous, like the beta of sorts, right? So Curve, for example, people are like, oh shit, yeah, let me buy Curve. But completely ignoring that this has been one of the weakest sectors in the market, and they're just like, okay, now it's gonna turn around. And I think that's possible, but it's not necessarily the best use of your money and time. If anything, you want to wait for these things to actually start putting in a little bit of a bottom formation, or like generally show some strength. Like, remember this, I was like, I want to see close above here so we can bet on upside. Never happened, and I would do the same here again, right? So basically, now we have this situation, this was the low, Curve BTC, and you can make an argument, I think, that if this goes up here, it's gonna outperform. And the crazy thing is now, like, and this is the cool thing about looking at these things on the Bitcoin pair, like, if you get an entry signal now, your target is basically where the market was when we last talked about it. It's a 300% increase. It's insane. Obviously, this is already a little bit of a move, but at least you have a little bit of strength. You can obviously play the low time frames, but from like a cyclical perspective, that's kind of how I would look at it. But generally, I wouldn't want to touch Curve, for example. I would rather, and this might sound stupid to a lot of you guys, but I would rather buy Uni. Like, I would rather buy the one that had the move that caused everything else to move than everything else. Hey Don, if I bought the 44k breakout, when is the time to panic? So, like, how I look at this, right? And congrats to buying the 44k breakout. That's quite sweet. That was a setup that we actually talked about. So I'll take all the credit, even though I didn't take any of the trade. No, but for real, like, if you got the 44k breakout, right, you got a close above here, it starts looking good. What I usually do is I keep those kind of trades if they're on leverage, right? If there's a spot, who the fuck cares? If you're bullish, you just hold. But on leverage, what I do is I keep my position, like, if I don't have a target, right? In this case, there was not really a target. There was just like, if it, like, it's good above 44. If it goes back below, that's bad. And then we'll see how high it goes, right? And then basically it went all the way to 52, 53K. And my target is then basically the first bearish thing that happens. And in my opinion, the first bearish thing that happened was yesterday's close. So I personally, if I took that trade, would have closed yesterday or today into like a little bit of a green candle, just so I can do the exact same trade again here. So if this pushes higher, right? And yes, you will have a little bit of a loss here in comparison to what if you just held. It's basically you have to consider whether you want to take the risk that this might just full retrace or not. And I think you can make a good argument for just holding even your leverage here. But for me personally, right, I'd be like, hey, that was a bearish argument here. I didn't have a target. It went up a shitload. I'm gonna take profit, wait till it comes back higher, and then bet on this leg again. Basically, it's the same thing. That was the same exact setup. You can get that we had here. You can get up here again, which is quite nice. But also, if you're bullish and you're like afraid of missing an entry, afraid of not being there, I really don't hate on just holding, as long as the monthly and the weekly time frame are all good. So it depends, basically, which is a shitty answer, I know, but I'm also not a financial advisor. I'm just telling you what I'm like, how I look at it, and that is very much not like I'm not the best bull market trader. There's better, like much better bull market traders out there. Uni dumping actually on the 1 minute. Yeah, I mean, of course. I don't know what people expect, right? They buy uni on a 70% plus candle, and then they're like, oh, it's dumping on the 1 minute. I mean, this can pull back towards like 8, 9, I think, and still be bullish, like on a wick. But I think like the best would be holding 10-ish, and then can have another move or not. Obviously, if it fully retraces, that's very, very bad news. But yeah, I mean, when I'm saying like I would rather look at uni than Aave or whatever the other, or curve, that basically just means I think there's better trade setups that you're gonna get on uni than anywhere else in the DeFi ecosystem. It's also one of the few charts that doesn't look like complete and utter trash in the DeFi space. Hi Don, thanks for streaming. What is your opinion on uni? Is this the Dino coin pumping, so the Pico top? No, I don't think so. I mean, nah. I mean, I'm not saying it might not be the Pico top, because that could be, at least before like an intermediate kind of pullback of sorts. I still think we're gonna make new all-time highs on Bitcoin, right? But like if this pulled back and actually broke market structure for the first time ever since the bottom, people would freak the fuck out, and then you get something like this. Wouldn't be too surprised. Also, obviously, would undercut a lot of the ETF buying, but I think that's also fine, because then people are going to be like, oh, ETF people are going to sell and it's all fucked, and then it keeps going higher. Like that wouldn't be the end of the world. I think generally like it's quite unlikely that we go towards like 32 to 35, but it's still possible. But I don't think like that this is just a pump to end the cycle, whatever. I think the uni pump is basically a pump because the DeFi people didn't get to eat. I mean, and I'm not even kidding here. Like, I'll just show the curve chart again. If you were holding curve since the Pico bottom, right? Like the Pico bottom, you made 45%, and this is fucking altcoin, right? Like you barely made anything, and that's after the last 3 weeks have been good. Before then, it was basically flat for. I mean, we can just. That's the yearly chart. This is last year. You know, like DeFi people just didn't get to eat. And obviously, if they find a good reason to jump into a coin like the one that we got with Uni, it's not too surprising that they jump. Can you go through how you scalp? I don't. I think it's a waste of time for 99.9% of people. Anything below the hour time frame, I think, is an utter waste of anyone's resources and time. And but obviously, I mean, maybe some people make it work. Most people that I see that pretend like they're hot shit trading the 5-minute chart or whatever, they don't make any money. Yeah, in a raging bull market, it might make sense. But otherwise, like that is a whole meme where people are just like trying to sell you a course, like a trading course, or trying to sell you a paid group because it seems so attractive. People are like, oh yeah, I can sit in front of the computer, take like 100 trades a day, and then just fucking make it. Possible during a massive bull run, like I said, but mostly a waste of time, in my opinion. So I just don't do it, and I don't think like the bigger your portfolio gets, the worse it gets. So it has limited upside generally. It has the downside is basically you losing everything and getting a gambling addiction because when you're trading that often, that much, it borders on that anyway. Like, can you really realistically differentiate between you thinking that it's actually a good trade, or you just wanting to have a trade because you're addicted to having that rush when you're trading a 5-minute chart? I'm not sure you can. So I think it's a little bit of a waste of time, and it gets you gets you into bad habits and gets you into bad situations. What's the strategy on these slow bleeds? You wait until they reverse, and I mean this, for instance, just the Bitcoin chart fully retraced the year before, which is quite fucking wild. On these kind of slow bleeds, the strategy that I think is best is just waiting till they stop, waiting till they give you a pop like here. Like that was a slow bleed to me. A lot of people were like, oh, this is so bearish. And I was like, this is actually much better than I expected. And then you get one pop up and that sets the trend. So like this slow bleeds, it pops up, it's gonna set the trend for more. Or it slow bleeds, it capitulates, it pops back up again, and then maybe you can get a second leg or something. Like that's how I look at these. Like I really don't like buying slow bleeds. And I also don't like shorting into them because then at some point you get this pop. So what I like to do is like if a slow bleed capitulates, that's something that you want to buy. If a slow bleed ends by like kind of like fucking over the bears, especially if it's into like an important structure like we had here, then you just fucking buy it. So that's kind of how I look at it. What is a reasonable pullback on Solana that you would be interested in? We can talk about Solana, but like the problem is it's coming from monthly resistance, and there's really nothing on the way towards like monthly support, which is way too low. So if anything, like maybe like 50 to 60 from a support standpoint, you can argue that this is also interesting up here. I think if you get like a bleed down here into 70s and then a wick down into 50, high 50s, 60s, I think that wick you would want to buy, and then I think there's a good chance it would actually close above 70. So you get a wick towards like 60, you get to buy it, you're pretty much immediately back above 70, and then you can argue for higher or for a bounce to end and then go lower. But the Solana trade, in my opinion, has played out. I think there's a lot of overhang on the Solana front, and the price is right. Like it doesn't seem too cheap. Like at like 10, this was ridiculous. And it's obviously easy to say in hindsight, but even like at 20, 30, when we were talking about it, I was like, there's something that is the only altcoin that I wanted to buy where I was like, yeah, this has a lot of upside because it's just so cheap. But I was focused on Bitcoin. Now I should have obviously been focused on Solana instead, but whatever, made enough money with Bitcoin to be happy. But yeah, now that it's played out and it's trading so high, for me personally, like I'm probably not going to touch Solana at all unless this happens. And it doesn't have to happen, obviously. But I think that kind of scenario where it dips into 70 and wicks into 60, that'd be interesting. That's decent enough kind of discount for me to be interested in Solana. But I think there's a lot of overhang, and I think generally speaking, ETH is it's probably gonna be the better trade going forward. Like, if you have ETH here, right, and Solana on a price level here, how it's now, right? So, I mean, obviously this is subjective, whatever, but that difference, right, and that's always gonna be the hard ceiling. The ETH market cap is basically the hard ceiling for Solana. It's the same with Bitcoin. The Bitcoin market cap is the hard cap for ETH, right? If that distance is not big enough, like, why the fuck would you spend your money there? There's other things that you can buy that have a little bit more potential. But then, like, when Solana giga dumped because of the whole FTX shit, that difference was big enough. It was basically like just clearly a good trade. But if that distance is not big enough, why the fuck would you be trading it? And I think that's kind of the situation that Solana is in right now. And I think a lot of people are just gonna be like, I can trade something else. Like, I'd rather buy ETH over Solana right now, and I would rather trade DeFi than the Solana on-chain stuff. That's kind of the point where we're at right now. But I could be completely wrong on that, and I'm not doing any of it. But even if I'm coming back in a month or two, I'm going to be focusing on ETH rather than on the whole Solana shit. I think that's a little bit overdone. People got way too hyped, which is good. It reflects in the price, and now everyone that got caught in the FTX debacle is going to get a lot more money, which is like generally good. If you had a meaningful correction now, would you still expect 60K to be a strong resistance? That's a good question. It's actually not that easy to answer. I think it'd be much weaker. It'd be much more interesting to, like, right now, if we went to 60K, I think only lunatics would hold. I think at that point you have to sell. If you're at any point reasonable. But if it pulls back here and then comes back up there, I actually think there's I don't know if I would want to sell. I think it could just do this and then go up. Right now, if it went up, I would expect this. And then maybe higher. It doesn't really change too much. I think generally up is the direction. Just depends on how we get there. What's Don Ball Tingle saying? I'm guessing chop, then 60K, then 46. It's very hard right now. I want to see the balls are not tingling right now. I want to see how the next 6 days play out. If they close, if we get the monthly close below 45, I'll respect the monthly close and I'll expect lower. If we close above, I'm gonna pretty much go with your prediction of, yes, higher first, then lower, and then higher again. In 2025, we will talk. That Capo was right about 12K, just saying. I mean, 12K tons of gold per Bitcoin, maybe. 12K is so fucking unrealistic. Anyone that thinks 12K is coming, is, in my mind, has completely lost it. I think, like, if you want to be, like, stupid, but at least in the realm of possibility, you'd be like, okay, we're going to, what's the lowest I could see this go? I think the lowest is this green box. I don't think we're going to go lower than this green box. And I don't think this is going to happen. I think the most reasonable, okay, this is as low as it goes, is 35 for now. But if all hell breaks loose, I think this is the lowest that I could see it. Basically, if it went to 20K, that's for me like going back to 3K back then. So, like, if we get another black swan, I could see it go down to 20. I cannot see it go down to 14 unless, and there's basically two things. I think at this point it might only be one that could take it that low. like that could take it lower than that, I think, in my head anyway. And that's Satoshi coming back and dumping his coins, which is at this point very, very unlikely. And I had Sailor dumping, which is pretty much almost like impossible. Those were the two. And I think even if Sailor dumped everything, we wouldn't go below 20. But yeah, both of those will not happen. So I think 20 is the iron floor, 35K is the more realistic floor. That might not even happen. That's happening if you're lucky. And then I think a pullback towards like 45, that doesn't seem too unreasonable. That's quite likely at some point. Why don't you just buy some altcoins that you're bullish on and forget about them for a while, since you don't need to manage them as frequently, or you're not interested in altcoins at all? I think I'm barely interested in ETH. I think everything else is shit. Like, I think Solana is not really that interesting. I think ETH is whatever. Everything beyond those is complete and utter dog shit, basically, or security, which, I mean, I like securities basically, but that's not how it works, right? If you run the security, you get fucked by the US. So, but I think pretty much all of this is like useless tokens, useless whatever. I might as well be play money. So, like, if I bought any of this, it'd be like buying some kind of like trading cards for a random game or something. We're pumping hard in the 1 minute. Wow. Oh shit, let's go. It's up only. No. I mean, it's not the worst chart in the world. It's not great, but it's also not that bad. And it can turn great really quickly. It just needs to do this, and then you have a great looking chart. So I wouldn't despair just yet. I think generally, if you're betting on upside, it's more likely, but also this is quite extended. So you are playing with fire. Like, if you're trading leverage, you're obviously playing with fire when it's this extended of a trend, but also like it can go much, much higher than this. Is the pump into 52K a sign of strength, or would that be a bearish retest? You mean into this? So, and this is how I look at these things. It's a good question. Like, would a pump into this resistance be a bearish retest, or would it be a bullish sign? And the answer to that is it depends how far away you move from it. Basically, like, let's say this goes like this and then comes back and just starts rolling over. That's obviously like quite bad. It's a bearish retest. But if you have a resistance that you're getting rejected by, and all price does is go like this and then comes back up, more often than not, this will just go. Because the bears were not able to capitalize on the breakdown, right? We are currently having a breakdown of sorts. The daily range broke to the downside. We had this before to the upside, right? Like, we had a range here-ish. Broke to the upside. This one broke to the downside. Now, obviously, it's a bit different. Like, they're a little bit different, but there's technically a breakdown happening. And if the bears cannot take advantage of this and just immediately price kind of like snaps back and just walks back up, just means people are buying the dip. Now, in this case, if you get like a flush and then you get a bunch of people repositioning, it's more likely to be a bearish retest. So it depends. So right now, if it comes back towards 52K, I'm not, like, I wouldn't want to short this. But if it breaks down and then comes back up, that doesn't seem like the worst short in the world, because then you have quite the risk-defined setup and you can just run with it. What do you think about low leverage trading, like with liquidation price below 10K for Bitcoin? I mean, yeah, go ahead. You obviously also have to consider funding and all, like the cost of having the position into whatever the fuck you're doing. But I don't hate it. Why Don hates ETH so much? Let us have a pump or two, man. I mean, I'm not hating ETH. It's my favorite altcoin. I mean, by far, actually, my favorite altcoin. It's been underperforming for a long time now, but it's starting to look better. And if it can finally do something bullish, I'm gonna be more than happy to jump on the ETH bull train. Tips for beginner traders. If you're starting out trading, I think I wouldn't necessarily focus on the trading part. I would focus on the ecosystem part, especially in crypto. And this is a tip that I've been giving for years, and it's been true for years. If you actually learn how this whole thing works, and this is something that I didn't do, and I'm worse off for it, but I'm also too lazy now to get into this whole thing. But if you're basically getting knee deep into the ecosystem and doing things on chain, doing things with the protocols, just testing and trying things, the rewards will be much better. And then once you actually know what the fuck you're doing, then I think, especially in crypto, then I think you can get into the whole trading aspect better. So if you're a beginner, learn how this stuff works. Now, when I was a beginner, none of this stuff really existed, and you could not do really anything with these protocols. I tried back then, and there was not that much to do. And then I just got stuck on the trading part, was profitable with it, so I just never bothered. But I think that's where most of the edge is, if you actually know what the fuck you're doing, and if you actually know what these protocols are doing, because then it's much easier to kind of judge whatever the fuck you're trading. And I think that's the best way to go about it as someone that is a beginner. Gonna take a while though, obviously. There's a lot of things to learn and try, and yeah, just generally play around with. Finally managed to catch one of these live. Just wanted to thank you and Cred for all the hard work. Truly appreciate both of you. We appreciate you, man. It's nice that people hang out and listen to my mediocre and Cred's above mediocre opinions. How far do you think ETH can go? I think ETH can... I honestly think the cap for ETH, and I think that's reasonable, is actually flipping Bitcoin for a short while. I think that can be this cycle's top. Like the top. Like let's say Bitcoin is at 100K, and we get like an alt season of sorts. I think ETH could briefly flip Bitcoin, which would put it at astronomical numbers. Because I mean, that would mean that Bitcoin is almost, or like is twice as high, and ETH would have to be like 4 or 5 times as high as it is now, if not higher. I don't know the flipping number right now, but that would mean like, yeah, I don't know, like 10K ETH, whatever. I don't think that's necessarily too out there. So I think there's like on the ETH front, there's a good trade. It's just, you need to time it right. Have you ever considered holding on to a little Bitcoin just in case the fiat world blows up and the Bitcoin narrative takes over? No, because I don't think that's in any way, shape, or form realistic. Like, I don't think that's going to happen. One, I don't think the fiat world is going to break apart. And I think if it does, Bitcoin and crypto is going to be useless anyway. Like, it's not going to help you at all. Like, this is an argument a lot of the gold people do. Like, oh yeah, but what if everything goes to shit? If everything goes to shit, it's not going to help you. Now, if your country goes to shit, right, then yes, can be quite useful. But there's a few countries that if they go to shit, everything goes to shit anyway. So like the US, if the US completely fails, I mean, you're fucked no matter where you are in the world. Like the greater Europe also kind of like, you're kind of fucked. And then the Bitcoin or the whatever the fuck isn't going to help you. Then you have other problems and there's other solutions, like much more useful solutions. So I don't think like that whole narrative is kind of useless. The only thing that like if you're living in a country that is not one of like these important ones that basically are too big to fail, like if you're living in Turkey, for example, I think Bitcoin is a great hold. You should probably have a shitload of it. It's probably the best thing that you can hold, because if something goes wrong, you can just fuck off, right? Love me, my Turkish brothers. Or like there's a lot of other countries where it makes a lot of sense, but I'm not living in one of them. So yeah, if you think everything is gonna go to shit, I think there's a million things better than crypto. If you live in a country that is already going to shit, I think Bitcoin is pretty much one of the best things that you can have. And it just depends, basically. And if you think that a lot of countries will go to shit in the future, but not necessarily yours, it's also not necessarily the worst bet just on, okay, number will go up. But yeah, the whole, like I very much don't subscribe to the apocalypse scenario where people are like, oh yeah, and then all the fiat systems are gonna go down. Like such a dumb argument to me. Can you explain how a rotation would work? Like when to sell Bitcoin for ETH? I mean, you just see a bunch of ETH strength and then you just buy into it. Because ETH has the narrative, right? So something that you always have to have for these rotations to happen is the narrative. And the stronger the narrative, the better, and the easier the rotation goes. But basically, if Bitcoin goes up more, even if it stays like where it is right now and ranges a bunch, you're gonna get the ETH narrative of ETH is gonna get an ETF too, and it's possible. I don't think it's as likely to come as fast as Bitcoin did, but I mean, who the fuck knows? As in, I don't think it's gonna come this year, but I've been positively surprised by an ETF before. The Bitcoin ETF went much better than I expected, so maybe we're gonna get an ETH ETF. And then you have the narrative, right? I mean, Bitcoin went up a shitload because in large parts due to the ETF. You could make the same argument for ETH, and then you just need this chart to look decent, and then you can get a rotation at any point, right? Like Bitcoin doesn't have to be at 100K for this to happen, or at 90 or whatever, 80. It just basically you need to start seeing like you need to start the ball. Like this always, like these narratives in crypto, they start small, right? And then they pick up more and more. It's like a snowball effect where they get bigger and bigger and more people come on. And then like it starts getting bigger, the narrative, and bigger and bigger and bigger. And then oftentimes like the people that even bought early into the narrative are actually gonna, like they didn't buy enough, so they buy even more. And then they get their friends and family. Like this is how it works, right? And as long as you cannot start this chain, right? Like if you basically, like the narrative ball starts rolling, but then it stops again, and it's something that we've been seeing here quite a bunch, right? Like the snowballs are rolling down, but they start rolling and then they stop, and then the momentum is dead, and then it takes a while to get it going again. But if this goes, it's gonna go hard, I think. Like the narrative is there, and the narrative is gonna be traded upon. I will trade it if I get to. After ETH ETF gets approval, I'm going to dump ETH. Yeah, I think that would be wise. Is there any good dip buying levels besides 44K? Good question. The answer to that is, I think, basically, and I'm not even the biggest fan of 44K, because if you get to 44K, there's a good chance we just dump lower. I think the best dip to buy at this point is, I mean, if you desperately want to buy a dip, I think you can just buy this one. But I think the better one to buy is just no dip at all. It's just strength. As in, you break through 52, that's a sign of strength. It doesn't have to end up in higher numbers. I mean, sometimes it just does this and then fizzles out and then looks like shit and ranges for a while, right? Tough luck. But I think, like, if you just look at recent history, whenever you've started like crawling out of these resistances, we've been getting sizable moves, and betting on that to end, I think is a poor choice, right? So basically, if you break, you have to expect a bigger move, right? And then it doesn't really matter if you bought 51 or 52. Like, that's in the grand scheme of things nothing. Like, if you buy 52 and it goes to 60, are you really going to be upset about not having bought 51? And I think the answer to that question is, I mean, crypto people are probably going to be upset because you cannot flex your entry as well. But the end result is relatively similar. You're just avoiding the risk of in between. But yeah, I think 44, I mean, that's support. It's a level, or like 42, 43, whatever, like this area here on the weekly time frame. That's decent. And I think that's like, I would want to, like, if I was trading, I would want to buy that, but I wouldn't want to hold it. So if I'm bullish, I actually don't want this to go towards 42, because I think then you buy 42, you sell 46, 47, and expect lower at that point. Because we haven't seen any of these kind of pullbacks, and you don't want to start with it now that we have the ETF narrative going, because then the ETF narrative disappears too quickly and you can get a bigger dump. Do you think other altcoins have the chance to have an ETF submitted? I mean, we joked about a Litecoin ETF down the road just because it's so simple. But no, I don't know. I think at some point, you're like, if this continues, if we get an ETH ETF, I think we're gonna get all the ETFs. It's gonna be a shit show, but that's down the road. As long as the market keeps going up, right? Like, if Bitcoin's trading at 100K and altcoin still exists, there's gonna be altcoin ETFs in the future. I would bet on it. Hi Dawn, monthly resistance 58.8, weekly 59.9. Do you have any way to tell which one you should sell? It depends, but I generally sell the higher one. Because, so, like, how this works, right? And this is kind of like a lesson in time frames of sorts. You can, let's say you get the monthly, next month it goes well and closes here at like 58, 59K, right? Up here, you would be like, hey, this closed at resistance, maybe I want to take some profit. But obviously, when you then go down like to the weekly time frame, it can still intra-week go easily towards like 60K, and it's very, very close. Obviously depends. I mean, sometimes you just want to sell. Like, if I desperately want to get out, I will sell the first. Like, I would sell 58, but in this instance, there's no real urgency. So I would just take the higher one, and we basically get the close at the monthly resistance or whatever, and then you can be like, okay, but I can intraday, it can easily trade into the next resistance, and usually it does. But yeah. Hi Dawn, CT talks a lot about alt season, but some of mine are up 70 to 80%. Is it better to take some off the table? I'm the wrong guy to ask on that from. I think altcoins are quite depressed, right? On the I don't know what I was drawing there. Because it's Bitcoin dominance, I shouldn't be drawing on there in general. Like, people ask me questions and I draw on the chart and I look back on it, I was like, what the fuck was I responding there? Altcoins are quite depressed, right? Like, they've been getting hammered, so I wouldn't necessarily say there has been alt season. The reason why people on CT talk about alt season is because they want it to happen, but we haven't even seen anything close to it, and retail isn't really there yet either. So, like, I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily want to be selling just because CT is talking about alt season, if you have faith in those altcoins and if you think they're gonna do well. But yeah, obviously if Bitcoin pulls back here, altcoins are gonna take a massive dump. So, but generally, like that whole, oh, I'm gonna counter trade CT, it's a little bit of a meme, because at the end of the day, like, you're following people that you think know what they're talking about, right? Otherwise you wouldn't be following them. Well, otherwise you're doing a piss poor job of kind of like making social media usable. And then if everyone that you're following, that you kind of handpicked, as in like you kind of deemed them decent follows, talks about old season, like if you start counter trading them, you kind of counter trade your own opinion on who's decent in the market or not. And that can go well, obviously, but it doesn't seem like a good strategy. So just make up your own thing. Like, just because people talk on CT doesn't mean anything. I have a little bit more of an insight, just because I'm like, oh, how's sentiment out there looking? And then I just tweet something that is gonna rile people up, and then I look into my comments and I see how people are positioned, and generally how the normal people think. And that gives me a little bit more of an insight. But if you're just basically handpicking people that you think are qualified to take opinions off just by following them, it doesn't seem like the best idea. Hi Dawn, how can you tell whether retail is in or not? Stupid question. It's not that stupid. It's actually quite a good question. There's multiple ways, obviously. One is, and this is something that we've seen in past cycles, where you basically saw Coinbase, the app Coinbase, be basically number one on the App Store, where people are just flocking into crypto. Everyone is interested, as the easiest way to see. But also just in general, like mostly you see it in altcoin flows, as in like how altcoins trade. When retail gets in, and they get in with force, usually they buy the biggest shit there is. And I mean, we are retail at the end of the day, but like the big horde of retail trading usually comes in near the highs, and they buy the shittiest of the shit, and that hasn't really been happening. So there's been memes and stuff, and people are like, oh yeah, retail's back, the memes are trading, but like that's very seasoned crypto people, right? Like no one knows about the memes early in the cycle besides people that have been around for a while. Gold is ripping. Yeah, it's always funny. These, like, gold is ripping and it's up 0.7%, but obviously that's a lot for gold. I think gold's fucking stupid, not gonna lie, but the chart is not that bad. Like I think if you can buy Bitcoin, why would you buy gold? I don't see a world in which gold makes more sense than Bitcoin. But it's not a bad chart. You have basically had a breakout. You had a retest of that breakout. It's not the greatest, like this. And it's something that we talked about a lot. Like that's the breakout you want to see, right? You have a breakout, you don't get no retest, you get nothing. And that's the one, I mean, this is, if you look at streams from 2019, we actually talked about gold a lot. And I was like, this actually looks fucking incredible. And then it was the proper run, right? What it's doing now is basically like these breakouts, retests. This I don't like. Like I could see this make new highs, but I think it's gonna be like a period of shit again. But I could be wrong on that. It's not my market. But I think in general, like I don't know why people buy gold if they have the opportunity to buy Bitcoin. Do you think a recession will happen this year? I don't know, fucking clue, mate. Like people were telling me not to buy crypto and especially Bitcoin at 16K because of the recession and because everything was gonna go up in flames. And I bought regardless because I was like, I'm too stupid to understand whether we're gonna have a recession or not. But I can see that 16K is a good price, and now we're trading at 50K. And I still have no fucking idea whether we're gonna get like a recession or not. Like I think people are just overestimating their ability to call big global events like that. I mean, yeah, at some point you're gonna be right. Like if you called for it 100 times, at some point you're gonna be right. But is that really gonna help you, or is that gonna just make you look good in front of your friends? You're like, you have one tweet out of 100 that is actually correct. Cool. but trading wise, that's not gonna make you any money. You can't wear Bitcoin, yeah, but I mean, anyone that wears gold is a little bit cringe anyway, no? But then again, I don't know. Like that whole in real life status symbols, I have never and will never understand. Like running around with gold chains and like a super expensive watch, I just find it embarrassing more so than anything else. But I mean, that at least, like, if you're into watches and you're just like, this is the coolest piece of engineering, whatever, like, I'm down. Like, that's a cool argument. But if you're just like, oh yeah, there's 5 diamonds on my watch and it's out of gold, I'm like, no, dude, let's just get the fuck out of here. It's embarrassing. Like, how old are you? Basically, in my opinion. But yeah. Hi Don, what is the role of DXY in regards to crypto in general or Bitcoin specifically? My friends, you're overcomplicating things. Now, obviously, like, this is actually a cool thing because I've actually been so correct on this. I don't know if anyone watched the weekly open show that we used to have with Ledger Status, Cred and I, and we always talked about the dollar index. And I was like, this is gonna go in between this quarterly support and quarterly resistance for a long time. And that was basically after I was like, we're gonna get rejected here. That worked perfectly. I was like, this is the support that if it's gonna hold, it's gonna hold, and it held. And I was like, we're gonna trade in here for a long time, and that perfectly played out too. Just want to pat myself on the back, even though I have no fucking idea about any of this like traditional market stuff. This was just like nice market analysis, and I still think that's roughly the case. Like, I'm expecting the dollar index to go sideways here a little bit, for a little bit longer. And the impact on crypto, I mean, people say like if the dollar is strong, stuff isn't, like, anything against the dollar isn't as strong. But other than that, like, my expertise stops as well. So I generally advise, like, if you're starting to add this stuff, and this is something that you can do really easily, right? Like, you look at Bitcoin, you're like, oh, I don't know, but let me look at the S&P, let me look at the dollar index, let me look at euro versus Japanese yen, and then try to kind of make a reasoning happen why Bitcoin is going to go up or down. This is not going to help you, I think. If you make things too complicated, like, how are you going to measure whether you're actually being right or if you're just being lucky, right? Like, if you just add so much information to a relatively simple trade, you can basically never judge whether you're actually on the right track or not. And I think people overcomplicate this stuff too much with going like far out of where they should be. Like, yes, the dollar index will have an impact on crypto, but it's going to be marginal. If crypto is set up to go up, even if the dollar index goes the wrong way, crypto will still go up. And I think that is the thing to focus on, not necessarily all of these other things. Now, obviously, if you're trading traditional markets, that might be interesting to you, but then you're asking the wrong guy, because then you probably know more about this, about how the dollar index is going to move than I do. Where would you buy Sol ETH? I mean, Sol ETH is basically a margin trade, right? Like, you're betting on, if you want to buy Sol ETH, you're betting on Sol versus Ethereum. So you'd be long Sol, short ETH. I don't know, what's your gut feeling about consciousness? Simply an emergent result of information processing in the brain, or a more fundamental constituent layer of reality? Not financial advice, obviously. Jesus Christ, you guys, you're asking me the wrong questions. Oh no. I mean, that whole conscious thing is super interesting. I think it's, in my opinion, it's an emergent result of information processing in the brain, like you said, but could be wrong on that. Like, that's the biggest questions of them all. Where the fuck are we coming from, and why are we the way we are? And I mean, you can answer that with religion or with a lot of other things. and I think it's all valid. I wouldn't necessarily like whatever, and those kind of questions are, I think you will never find the answer of. You can just pick whatever you wanna and then just go with that. Don, do you think if Bitcoin goes higher first, like touching 58 and 59K, then below 40K, is it still likely? Or 42 to 43K is a good place to buy and hold? So if it went up right now and it went to 60K, I think the next, and I mean, this is just how these kind of trends go, right? Like if we went to 60K, I think, I mean, the best chart here is the monthly at that point. If we go to 60K and we get a pullback, this is as low as I would expect it to go, which would be 45, 44, 43. Maybe you get a wick a little bit lower, but that's kind of how low I would expect it to. Like if we close below resistance, then this one, like I'm always on the monthly time frame, I'm always at most targeting the next support, wherever that may be. Now, obviously, if you're trading on the daily time frame, you can be like, there's a support here, for example, that you can draw if you want to. Oops, I'll just do it like this. There's a support here. You can buy this, but you can also kind of be like, yeah, that support is going to get overrun, and it's going to go towards 47. And on the daily time frame, you can just skip supports like that. On the monthly time frame, I think it's foolish to do so. So it depends. But yeah, I think that's enough for today. It's been fun. Thanks for the great questions. Actually, this time, the best questions we've ever had, I think. Especially the questions about where the fuck the universe is from. Very much appreciate those. But no, in all seriousness, thanks for giving me good things to bounce off of and for hanging out. Always appreciate it. Hope you guys are having a nice, or gonna have a nice weekend. Cred's gonna be back next week, so you don't have to hang out with me as much anymore, which is great for all of our sakes. Big shout out to Woo again for sponsoring the show. Go check them out. Links are in the description. And we'll see each other on whatever. Tuesday is going to be newsletter. Wednesday is going to be the next show. So Wednesday probably. Much love. Bye.